So welcome to James's imaginary friend. You. As my imaginary friend, I will be talking to you often, and I'll be sharing the ideas in my head and the conversations I have. How many of you have ever brought back someone from the past? Just imagine anything. And in my core humanities class, we're learning about ancient and medieval histories, and we're learning way back in the boonies. We're reading Herodotus' Histories, Epic of Gilgamesh. We're reading Apuleius' Golden Ass or Metamorphosis. And just imagine grabbing one of those people and teleporting them to your time and having to explain our world to them. How would you explain it? Now, I want you to think, this is just a true conversation I had in my head. That lasted half a day, and it started in my car, and this guy, this medieval Greek, part of the Trojan War, just hopped up into my passenger seat of my car, and he just was teleported there. He was having dinner with his family, and all of a sudden he's now in the 21st century in the front seat of my 25-year-old car driving down the freeway at 70 miles per hour. What's going through his mind? And so I got to be careful, because this is like a Trojan person, not Trojan, a Greek, and he is dangerous. And I got to explain to him what's going on before he kills me, right? And then kills himself, because we're going 70 miles an hour down the freeway. So you have to talk to him. And in your mind, you're frantically like, hey, it's, you know, I'm a friend, right? And so once you get that established, then the fun starts, and you get to explain to him everything that we take for granted, that we don't always understand, like how lucky we are that we have some of this stuff. Not necessarily lucky, but how different life would be. So as we're driving down the road, I'm trying to explain to this Greek who's never seen an internal combustion engine or a car not driven by horses or a donkey or whatever they want to use. So I'm explaining that we're using fire inside metal blocks with cylinders, and then we got electricity, and then you got to go down that whole route of probably about 30 minutes of explaining how we get electricity with the magnets and the different coils of wire, and then you're trying to explain hertz and voltages and amperage, and it gets complicated. And so then you just kind of like, okay, can't teach you the entire world in one car ride. So then you're going on, it's like, okay, we're going fast, right, on the car because of an internal combustion engine. I can tell you more about that later, but it uses fire. And yeah. Then I made the mistake of turning the radio on. So he thought someone else was in the car, and he went ballistic. So I had to turn the radio off, and then he looks at me and he's like, what was that? The spirits, the gods, Shamash is in my car, or Anu, or Ishtar throwing a little tantrum, right? So I have to explain to him, just like the internal combustion engine, we're going to go over it later. We're going to go over a radio. But don't worry, it doesn't mean there's anyone in the car. It's just a technology you haven't heard. He accepts that. So we can keep going. Then he sees the street lights, and he's a little confused. He's wondering if there's fairies. I'm like, no. Just like the car, just like electricity, it's not fairies. So then we keep going, and I'm explaining to him that this city that I'm living in is actually not that big. And he's looking at these buildings, these skyscrapers, and he's just in awe. And I'm explaining that this city is only about 300,000 people. And he's like, 300,000 people? That's a lot of people. Now, that he speaks English and I speak English, that's wrong. That's a contradiction in my mind, but it's also a contradiction that they would come back from the past at this time with technology. I don't really think it's ever going to happen, of time travel like that. So anyways, we get to my house, and he comes inside, and he's looking at it. It's small. It's a studio. This is also my bed. It opens up. It's kind of cool. And I turn the TV on, and he's just in awe of moving pictures. He has to go up and touch it. And I explained to him there's little rods in there, and when they're electrified with a different current, they actually change colors and they move and the different stuff at the really small level, the liquid crystal displays. And so he doesn't quite understand that, so I'm just like, you give up. And then he sees my fish in a fish tank. He's like, are these food? Are they delicacy? I'm like, no, they're a hobby. We're weird people who raise animals for fun, and they're not even spiritual. Because, you know, back in his time, I mean, there's Egyptians that are raising cats, and a lot of different animals have different spiritual meanings. And I'm like, they're not even spiritual. We just have fish, right? Because we live in this day and age where we have a TV and a radio and a car and a small studio that we live in, and we raise animals to keep ourselves company. And I like fish because I can leave them for long periods of time and they're okay. And I explained that to him too. And I also explained that we have dogs. And no, they're not for food in this culture that you're in now, but in other cultures they are. And then I turn the faucet on to get him some water. And he's just in awe, like, how do you get water out of a pipe? And then I have to go into the deep explanation of the pipes and the city water and the water treatment plants. And then he asks where he can relieve himself. And I'm like, it's in the bathroom. And I'm like, oh God, do I really have to explain a toilet to this guy? I'm like, how would you explain using a toilet to someone who's never used a toilet? I mean, do you need to tell them to wash their hands? Do they know what soap is? Because back then they would do the steam bathhouses or whatever, and they would have oil. I mean, they had soap, but like, do they know about diseases? I mean, they do, but do they know that comes from fecal matter? Probably. But some, maybe not as much. And so I'm like, how would you explain? I was like, so this is a toilet. I'm not going to demonstrate, right? So you lift the lid and say, here's a seat. That's for when you need to sit down and use your business, do your business. And you flip the seat up, and that's when you can stand up and do your business. And then this nozzle here, or this button, gets everything gone. And then you wash your hands here. And that was my imaginary friend for the day. Some ancient Greek. And then what was really cool was I had a conversation with him that I can tell him all about the awesome advances that they did with math and the inventions that we built off of. That everything that I'm talking about, the Pythagorean theorem for trigonometry, is used all the time as a foundation for mechanical engineering, right? I'm not a mechanical engineer, and I'm not even that good at math. But I do know that everything we have nowadays is built off of everything. And I'm explaining this to him of how important his society was, and that the scientific findings that they have done and the different philosophers was a huge deal for us to have the things we have today. And then I start thinking, it's like, will that ever happen? Will I ever have to explain this stuff to anybody? And I realize, what if there's tribes in Brazil that have never seen, or in Africa that's never seen technology? Like, I guess it's possible. Would I want to do that? Probably not. It's one thing to have it in your head and one thing to do it for real life. That was my imaginary friend for the day. And goodbye.